If you walked up to someone in the street and you said birds, they'd either say custard or Bill Oddie. And now Bill Oddie, because I wouldn't be interviewing Custard, wants you to join his Summer Bird Feeding is Cool revolution. Why? Well, let's ask him. Hello, Bill Oddie.
Well, first of all, I have to complain on the lack of interviews with Custard. Really, because I don't see why it should have been ostracised like that, because I know some Custards who've got interesting things to say.
I'll change that tomorrow. So, people will know, obviously, feeding the birds in the winter, that makes sense, but why should we feed birds in the summer?
Well, and it always surprises me, to be perfectly honest, that it is still a pretty widespread fallacy that you should only feed during the winter. I mean, it's obvious then, and I think it's history in a way. You know, that we've always got an image of way back from the 1940s. I think I remember these things because when we had some really hard winters and birds were literally dying in many places, and it was obvious. And you know, it seems to make sense, doesn't it? Oh, hard conditions, terribly cold. They must be finding difficulty in finding food and open water, so that's when we feed them. All that is true, but the honest truth of the matter is that, in fact, to my mind, it's actually tougher for birds during about now, really, or maybe I'd knock a week off, sort of middle of June or something like that. The reason being that the adults, in fact, are having to feed youngsters, and they use up an immense amount of energy to find food, normal food, you know, natural food, caterpillars and so on and so on, because they have to find soft food for the youngsters while they're still in the nest. They can't be chomping away on peanuts or anything like that. And, in fact, the adults, ironically, are almost as hungry as the young birds themselves. So it is, and I reckon it's the time when there is more bird food consumed if it's put out and available and of the right kind of variety during the summer months than there is during the winter months. To put it simply, there is no time during the year when you're not helping by putting seed out, you know.
And the stuff that we put out in the summer, should it be the same as the stuff we put out in the winter?
No, not necessarily. There's plenty of things which do overlap. The general rule is, I mean, think babies, think human babies, you know, they have to have soft food, you know, that sort of mashed up baby food. And that is very much the same principle with birds. I mean, some of the birds, for example, that you won't get in your garden, like the seabirds, it's an unsavory thought, but they literally fed sort of fish paste, you know, because an adult, let's say puffin or cormorant or something like that, you know, will go and catch the fish and then sort of reduce it into soft food within the stomach and then regurgitate it. And I know you don't want to have that vision going for too long, but that to the babies is absolutely perfect soft food. The smaller birds in your garden don't tend to do that, but there are softer foods, and there are, for example, there's one feed which I think goes under the name, if I remember rightly, it was mealworm crumble. You can, in fact, order real live mealworms, which I personally do recommend, not for me, but for the birds. They absolutely love them, and it does help enormously, both for adults and youngsters.
You talk about birds coming into your garden. Apart from putting out food, what else can you do to encourage and help birds that come into your garden?
They're just these basic things, you know, and it's not difficult. It's nothing like, you certainly don't have to have a special wildlife garden. I mean, my garden, when people first see it, think it's been designed to scare away the birds, and indeed everybody else, if it comes to that, because it is fairly bizarre, absolutely full of sort of wind chimes and slightly hippie sort of feel to one bit of it, and a sort of Indian bit down one end, and a gnome corner, and all those things. It's very colourful and in its way quite noisy, but it's also absolutely full of birds, and that's partially because I do feed the birds regularly every day, but also because there's fair amount of open water, and it's a very small garden. I hasten to add here. We're only talking less than a tennis court size, definitely. But I've got little ponds which I've put in, and I've got several plants and flowers and bushes and so on and so forth, which British birds like, and that's important to remember. If you know, they're not too fond of foreign food, so all these exotic plants from New Zealand or Australia or South Africa don't necessarily provide any food for the British birds. So it's plant British, you know.
And this time of year, is it a good time of year to see birds?
Well, funnily enough, no, I think I would say no. It's a mixture, and it depends whether you're lucky. I mean, if I take my own garden, this morning, the good bit was that there are relatively new youngsters just out of the nest, and we've got a little family of bouncing jays. We've got these 3 jays which have obviously left the nest a few days ago and are absolutely full of life. They're noisy blighters, of course, but they're on the peanuts now. They keep grabbing peanuts from which are really meant for the smaller birds, but they are very entertaining indeed, and that's one of the pluses when you've got birds like that are young and energetic. But the adult birds tend to disappear. I often get people saying, you know, what's happened? I've lost, we had blackbirds and a couple of robins and that sort of thing. I'm just not seeing them at the moment. But don't worry about that, because what they have to do is molt. They have to change their feathers at this time of the year because they're in such a mess, having brought up families, that they really need to change those feathers. And during that period, they're a little bit vulnerable. It can't fly so well. And so a lot of garden birds disappear for July, and then sometime, or part of August or whatever, you know, and then early autumn or the end of the summer, suddenly they'll pop out and they're looking all fresh and lovely, and basically they've been there, but they've been going through that rather embarrassing process of changing feathers.
Now, you've got your own range of bird food available.
Yes.
Now, was that inevitable given the amount of research, the amount of time, the amount of kind of experience you have with birds?
Yes, I think probably it was. I mean, I've been connected with Haith, the company who basically put the recipes together and so on and so forth, and discussed these things with them for years, you know. And they're one of those smashing companies that you know, I bet I hadn't mentioned them all, but there are companies in other areas of food and whatever that you tend to buy that have these traditional companies that have got a great reputation, and I think it does make a difference. You know, people who really care and have been working on it for years, and I've been up to their factory, I suppose you'd call it. Really, it started off as a rather lovely barn, but it's just got bigger and bigger. And you know, I could actually see the amount of work and research that goes into that. The only thing I draw the line at, just about, mind you, although I've been tempted, is actually tasting it myself. Although I have often thought there are some of those mixtures I could quite happily put a bit of milk on, and they're every bit as good as what it passes for moose.
Now, obviously you are a nature lover, and through various TV things and that kind of thing, I think we, as the British public, have become more aware of nature. Do you think that's the case? Do you think we are more aware of what's around us now?
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, certainly getting to, you know, looking back, as I have reason to do every now and again these days, and you sort of look back and think, blimey, you know, there was nothing available when I was a youngster, you know, when I was a teenager, even in the 1940s, 1950s. I mean, virtually nobody fed birds then, and nobody knew about them. There weren't any books. There was only the Observer's Book of Birds. Was about it if you wanted to know what you were looking at. So you know, for a start, bird watching and bird feeding have escalated just amazingly all over the world, actually.
And here's a question that I know a lot of people want to know, Bill. When are you going to be back on TV?
Yeah, well, I'm one of the people who wants to know. I can honestly say that is the truth. I mean, I won't go into all the rather strange details of what's gone on these last few years, but partially it was there was a health thing involved in it. But having said that, I'm perfectly capable of doing things. In fact, I've been very busy. I mean, I've been taking a chance to take time off and go abroad a lot more and do a bit more exploring. And I've been doing quite a lot of little bits of filming for such causes as Compassion in World Farming and Renewable UK for the energy things and that sort of thing, because they're massive subjects and they're extremely important. And I don't know. The more the years go by, the more I realise how much misinformation is willfully purveyed to the public by certain newspapers.
Well, you can find out more information about Bill's summer bird feeding revolution, and I think there's also links on there, especially to the farming charity,
yes,
isn't there?
I'm pretty sure there are, yes.
Yeah, on billsbirdfood.co.uk, billsbirdfood.co.uk, there's YouTube, there's Twitter, there's all those kind of things. Bill is...
Just Google it.
Yes.
It's the easiest thing.
billsbirdfood.co.uk. Bill Oddie, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Cheers.